Yeah, that would be
Here we go,
easier, I
everybody,
think,
quiet
easier to
a sec.
maintain.
Don't forget to smile. First countdown is for me and Bruce.
Hello, I'm Lisa Vorderbruggen, political editor and columnist for the Contra Costa Times. Welcome to a forum of candidates running for the 11th Congressional District in the general election on November 2nd. District 11 includes Dublin, Pleasanton, portions of Sunol, Brentwood, Danville, San Ramon, Black Hawk, Byron, Diablo, Discovery Bay, and other portions of Alameda, Contra Costa, San Joaquin, and Santa Clara counties. Today's forum is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Diablo Valley, Contra Costa Times, Contra Costa Council, Contra Costa TV, Contra Costa Elections Department. Hello, I'm Lisa Vorderbruggen, political editor and columnist for the Contra Costa Times. Welcome to a forum of candidates running for the 11th Congressional District in the general election on November 2nd. District 11 includes Dublin, Pleasanton, portions of Sunol, Brentwood, Danville, San Ramon, Black Hawk, Byron, Diablo, Discovery Bay, and other portions of Alameda, Contra Costa, San Joaquin, and Santa Clara counties. Today's forum is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Diablo Valley, Contra Costa Times, Contra Costa Council, Contra Costa TV, Contra Costa Elections Department, and Scholar Ollie at Cal State East Bay, with significant funding from the Lesher Foundation of Walnut Creek. In addition, the cities of Walnut Creek, Richmond, and Concord have generously provided crew for this production. The candidates are Democratic incumbent candidate Jerry McNerney, and Republican nominee David Harmer. David Christensen, the American Independent nominee, declined to participate in this forum. We drew lots before the show to determine our speaking order, so we're going to jump right into our roundtable discussion with our first question directed to Mr. McNerney. Mr. McNerney, as you know, the House on August 10th approved $26 billion state and school aid package to prevent layoffs, teachers, firefighters, and other public employees. Republicans have called it an example of more Democratic spending and bailing out states that don't have very smart financial policies. You supported this bill. Why did you support it, and did you think it's going to do some good?
Well, thank you, Lisa. Yes, I supported the bill. You know, these are very tough times, and there's a lot of hardship right now in the district. Our schools are suffering significantly. Our first responders. And I think it's important we continue to support our schools so that we give our kids the tools they need to succeed in a very competitive world. Also, it's critically important that we keep our first responders on the job, our police, our firefighters, and I want to make sure that our district is safe and secure and that our kids have a good, safe environment and a good schools. And I think it's important for us to assume those responsibilities, and I voted accordingly.
So does the federal aid, do you believe, sort of keep California from making tough decisions it needs to make? I mean, if the feds bail them out?
Well, California certainly isn't the only state in trouble, and the troubles here are significant. certainly the state legislature and the governor need to work together to find solutions. And it's important for them to work in a bipartisan way, which hasn't happened yet. But right now, the country's in a financial hardship, and I think we can assume for a year or two that there'll be some level of support from the federal government.
Okay, so Mr. Harmer, what's your assessment of this? I mean, Mr. McNerney seems to indicate this is a short-term issue for what's a big crisis in many states.
Lisa, unfortunately, the federal government is spending money that it doesn't have, and it is leaving the tab for my children and everyone else's. It is fiscal child abuse. What's going on is doing no favors. There is no magic pot of money in Washington, D.C., from which all this is funded. Quite the contrary, the U.S. Treasury is borrowing the funds to pay for these programs. And that is precisely what is perpetuating the economic sclerosis we find ourselves suffering from now. We're borrowing money we don't have to spend on programs that we can't afford, and we're leaving the bill for the next generation. Now, that's not only very expensive, it's wrong. This year, of every dollar the federal government spends, 46 cents will be borrowed. And it might be justifiable if it were just short-term, but it's not. According to both the administration's Office of Management and Budget and the Congressional Budget Office, these deficits are projected to continue almost in perpetuity, with virtually no diminution over the next 10 years. We are heading towards a situation like Greece recently encountered, where we will be borrowing so much that the markets simply can't sustain it.
So what's the alternative? You know, the schools need the money, the certainly when we call 911, we want a firefighter to show up at our house.
Of course we do, and I find it extraordinary that with all the money that is wasted at all levels of government, as soon as it becomes necessary to tighten the belts, what do we talk about? The very services that people rely on the most. Nobody wants to cut funding for education. As the parent of 4 children in the public schools and a wife who's a substitute teacher in the San Ramon Valley Unified School District, of course I don't want to see school funding cut. Likewise, of course we want our first responders to have the funding they need to do their very important work. That is not to say that every program in government is sacrosanct and everything that has been funded must continue to be funded.
All right, well, let's talk about health care. President Obama signed into law the most comprehensive changes in our federal health care system in 40 years. And Mr. McNerney has supported the legislation. And Mr. Harmer, you have been on record in opposition to it. Give the voters a little bit of a rundown of why you oppose the federal health care package, and would you indeed work to repeal or try to rescind the funding for portions of it if you were elected?
Yes, I would work to repeal Obamacare if elected, and I'll tell you why. That bill was an exercise of ego. It was a monumental display of will on the part of the congressional majority. The President and the Speaker of the House promised that that legislation would be open, available, transparent, that for 5 days the American people would have the opportunity to review before a final vote. That promise was broken. They promised that the hearings through which that bill would be developed would be televised on C-SPAN. That promise was broken. The bill was drafted behind closed doors. It ended up at 2,700 pages, and there are 3 unintended consequences on every page. Let me offer just one small example. Part of Obamacare is a new requirement that any small business that spends over $600 on any vendor must issue a 1099. Well, shoot, if you've got a scrapbooking business or you're a piano teacher, you're going to spend that at Office Max or the music store. This is an incredible burden on small businesses who don't have HR departments, who don't have compliance staffs. We could go on and on and on and on.
But we won't, right? No, okay.
Not if our time is up.
No.
Thank you.
So Mr. McNerney, you supported this legislation, although kind of late. You'd said you were evaluating. It's many pages. Why, in the end, did you decide to support it?
Well, Lisa, you know, healthcare is a personal issue for everyone. I was a small businessman for a long time, and I was on the self-insurance market, and I dealt with pre-existing conditions. I dealt with insurance premiums going up 20, 30% a year. I don't think people should have to go through that. So I made an effort for 9 months to go throughout the district. I spoke to doctors, nurses, veterans. I spoke to hospitals, administrators, public interest groups throughout the district. And a couple of things became very clear. The costs are